What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Happy 2021. We're glad 2020 is over, but we know we have a lot ahead of us in this new year. And as Annie, we welcome everyone back, all of our viewers who are here to watch with us for another season of Annie. And so we look forward to this new year. We're going to have a lot of guests, a lot of high school outreach, a lot of stuff just to help our youth and the needs that they need to graduate and especially go on to school after college or some sort of post-secondary education. So don't forget to share our page, tune into the next couple episodes. And next week, we're going to be hosting Dr. Lenata Warjak. She's actually from Berkeley, too. She went to UC Berkeley. She's from the Bay. She's one of the activists, the original activists who was on Alcatraz back in the day. And so we look forward to having her next week. But this week, we have a great episode for you, too. We're going to be highlighting UC Berkeley. And we're excited to hear from Patrick and all of our other guests that we have with us today. And like I said, next week, don't forget, Dr. Lenata Warjak's going to be coming. And the week after that, we're going to be highlighting a couple other outreach materials for high school students and more Native youth. So thank you all for coming here tonight. And yeah, we'll get into this week's episode. So this week we have Patrick Naranjo, Maya Rodriguez, and we also have a special guest, Dr. Denzel Street. He's going to tell us a little bit about more of the diversity at UC Berkeley. So Dr. Street, feel free to come on.
Hello, thank you for having us. I am Denzel Street. I am the Chief of Staff and Assistant Dean for Graduate Diversity at University of California, Berkeley, and we're really happy to engage with you and your guests today. I'll just give a brief introduction of the Office for Graduate Diversity, within which our American Indian graduate program sits. Our job is to be a resource for all graduate students on the Berkeley campus. So in incorporating AIGP in the graduate division, our hope is that we bring greater visibility to the needs of our Native students, as well as foreground their research and the valuable contributions that they bring to the Berkeley campus. As you may know, the University of California at Berkeley is one of the top research universities in the world. Objectively speaking, we are the #1 public institution in the world. And what a better place to highlight some of the work being done by our Native faculty and students, but more importantly, to also acknowledge that Berkeley itself sits on Native land, and so that anything that we can claim as being excellent starts with our foundation. And you'd hear a lot more from Patrick and Maya, who is one of our diversity and community fellows during this time. But I want you to know that if you're considering graduate school, Berkeley is the place you should be, particularly because I think the work Patrick and his office does really sets our both interests and the ways in which we engage our Native students apart from many of our peers. So I look forward to hearing from you all, and I know Patrick will talk about all the great ways in which we engage with our students, and more importantly, advocate for them and the research contributions they will make in the future as they seek to solve some of the problems that we face as a country and more importantly as a world. So thank you for having us, and we look forward to collaborating with you all much more in the future, and the great things that will come out of today's event.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Street, for taking the time to be here with us today. Just to let you know, we have Native youth on the other side. They're going to be watching this. They're going to be checking out UC Berkeley, what it has to offer for our students. So I think you gave a great introduction to the university. And yeah, I'm glad to hear from Patrick and Maya. And thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
And so and to introduce my co-host really quick, Ferdina, you all know her. She's our host of the year. And Dina, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? Then I'll go into my introduction.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another night of Annie. This is our first show for 2021. And just so excited to welcome my Haskell brother, Patrick Naranjo, to talk about his work at UC Berkeley tonight, as well as inviting Maya, and thank you to Dr. Denzel Street for that information, especially about Berkeley being on Indigenous land. I think that's so important in today's world to acknowledge and to be able to recognize and celebrate that. So welcome, Nevada Department of Education, to all our students out there that are listening in throughout the entire state and nation. So back to you, Avery.
Cool. Thanks, Dina. And so now I'll introduce our guests that we have for us today. Patrick and Maya, thank you all for coming here, or thank you for being with us tonight. Patrick, I'm not sure, would you like to introduce yourself, or Maya, whoever feels more comfortable? We can do Maya first if you like.
Please do. Would you like to introduce yourself, Maya, or?
Looks like she might be having some Wi-Fi trouble, but yeah, feel free, Patrick. Feel free to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about where you come from, the work you're doing right now, and yeah, thank you for coming.
Hey, thank you so much for this opportunity. So, like Dr. Street had mentioned, Berkeley is the #1 public institution in the world, and we do reside on the landscape of the Huichin-Ohlone sovereign nation here in Verona County. Big urban Indian population here in the Bay, and a very specific history of the Ohlone people and Indigenous history here at Berkeley, also in the Bay Area. And so foremost, our campus history has benefited from this legacy, and we are obligated to mention the original stewards of this land and tie those together with current initiatives that speak to who we are in the contemporary and the spaces that we occupy. So my name is Patrick Naranjo. Sengiti, good afternoon. I am a tribal member from Hapo-Winge, which is the original name of Santa Clara Pueblo. I'm a graduate from Haskell Indian Nations University. I'm a graduate from UCLA American Indian Studies program, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I spent a good amount of my career working at UNLV with folks on this call today, in particular, Dina Romero. And now I am serving as the new director for the American Indian Graduate Program here at UC Berkeley. Like I had mentioned, Berkeley has a very specific history here within the Bay and the Indigenous landscape. And a lot of our discussion today will be kind of highlighting what Berkeley is doing further, but more importantly, what that means for individuals such as ourselves who may not feel comfortable within these spaces or even considering them given our starting point within our education experience. And so that is me. I guess I could turn it over to Maya. I don't know if she was able to log back in.
I think so. It looks like she's gonna try to restart her program real quick, and then we'll have her do her intro. But yeah, thanks, Patrick, for being here with us. I think it's cool that we have natives all over the country, and like you said, we've had a good relationship with you. I've worked with you since I was an undergraduate. I remember working with you throughout the state, in the state of Nevada, just trying to get students to college. I think that's one really important thing that we need to really highlight. And then I think it's also important just to get undergraduate students to graduate school too. And so I'm excited to hear the opportunities that you're going to provide for us tonight.
Avery, it's almost fitting because you're going to be seeking out graduate programs. I'd like to take this time to congratulate Avery. He finished at the University of Nevada, Reno, and is on his way to a graduate program. So congratulations, Avery. And I'm so excited because you are a role model for all those students out there that are listening in. And it's just been a dream to watch you grow. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Looks like we have Maya back. We'll try Maya real quick. 1 second. Hey, Maya, how's it going? We'll test it out real quick. How's your sound? You want to say hey?
I can hear you. I hope you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Maybe just give a little bit of intro, where you're from, your background, and maybe what you're also researching right now.
Sounds good. Well. Hello, everyone.
Looks like we may be still having some technical difficulties. We'll get it figured out though. But yeah, on the Patrick, I'm not sure. Maybe if you want to introduce Maya a little bit, what you know about Maya and what she's done at Berkeley.
Absolutely. So I'm very excited to introduce Maya. She is a part of our inaugural graduate diversity fellowship program that we're starting here under the guidance of Dr. Street. She is an ethnic studies major, which is also the department which Dr. Warjack was the first in her kind being successful. And she is also under the guidance of Professor Beth Piatot, who is a member of our Native American Advisory Council, but also one of the notable faculty members in the Ethnic Studies Department, also here on campus at Berkeley. And so I'm super excited to highlight a grad student perspective under the guidance of Dr. Street to make more accountability about Native students considering Native research, and how they feel within some of these prestigious spaces like Berkeley. And, you know, I think maybe to start our conversation today, you know, reinforcing graduate level students, right? You know, I, as an undergraduate, or even prior to that, was very passionate about identity issues or Native issues, but to reinforce graduate students and some of their career goals based off of how in depth they, you know, go in their research, but also the process that kind of got them to this point to develop good research, right? What does that look like moving into a career setting? And how does that further inform pathways to education for Native individuals just like us, right? Who are considering opportunities of, you know, outside of our support network. And so I'm very excited to have Maya on this call and just highlight her experience, her role within the fellowship, but also I think what that means for us and our identities in prestigious spaces such as Berkeley. I hope that makes sense. Maybe to start off a little more of the conversation, you know, Berkeley is an old institution. It is the #1 public institution, but there is a very specific history that has somewhat reinforced these barriers within the American Indian experience for our students. I can talk a little bit more about that as we move into current programming on behalf of AIGP, but that is one of the reasons why I chose to leave Nevada, you know, our tremendous work that we spent so much time on, and to try to make a new application within, let's be honest, I think an institution that has not created somewhat of a welcoming environment for individuals like ourselves initially, much less to take on ideas of graduate research and career aspirations. And so this is exciting. But I hope that helps, and I'm really excited to jump into discussion about what that looks like in detail.
Patrick, I know that we had shared just a second ago about, you know, these types of institutions not really available to our students who are, you know, we have McDermott students listening in from the Fort McDermott Paiute Shoshone tribe. We have the Yerington Paiute tribe, the Walker River Paiute tribe, and many other tribal students that are in the very rural areas, or even in our local locations close to Reno and Las Vegas, that can't even envision themselves in a Berkeley without having to, you know, and you mentioned, you know, you being from, you know, New Mexico and from the Pueblo there, and how you have seen yourself go from there to Haskell to UCLA to now you're actually working in at UC Berkeley, and just amazes me that, you know, as Native, you and I, we share very similar backgrounds of, you know, coming from the reservation and living on the reservation and being a part of that culture. And then to see yourself here working with graduate students is amazing. So, you know, can you expand on that just a tad?
Absolutely. And so, you know I've said a lot, and I'll probably still do that because I'm an administrator. But the idea is that my student experience, right, largely informs the new direction and role of AIGP and accountability here at Berkeley, right? I say that because I didn't think I would be here either. And this is very much a part of the message for our younger students so that they can see themselves and that they can move past some of these fears or the unknowns that, you know, we had to navigate within our own individual experience. So what I'm saying, right, is that a lot of the new programming that's going to happen in AIGP based off of this history at this unique institution and the how do I say this, the communities that we come from. What does this look like moving forward, right? And how is this an application that is both, you know, allows our Native communities to reconcile around ideas of higher education? Yes, I think that's important. But also, how do institutions of higher education better complement the needs of diverse peoples, historically underrepresented peoples, right? And peoples who kind of begin from a non-Western support system. And I'll stop there because I think that a lot of the history at Berkeley and some of the things that we know very well through a colonial paradigm, if you will, right? I think that is what highlights what we can do better, right? And I'm so thankful for Dr. Street to, you know, join us today and provide the welcome. But it's not just a Native perspective. It's how does the Native identity complement additional intersectional individuals, right? Folks who may not have grown up in Santa Clara Pueblo, perhaps they grew up in Oakland, right? Which has a high urban Indian setting. How do we complement their navigation, their experience, and also make their identity meaningful within these spaces so that Berkeley can grow? Because it's not just a Native thing, it's other folks who feel, you know, underrepresented within these spaces. And we're still here. We're still very much a part of everybody's general student experience. And so what does that mean? And how does that complement, you know, other folks considering graduate research? One of the reasons why I'm super excited to do this is because I think Berkeley is truly an exceptional space. We are a large institution with various Indian programming and resources that reside throughout the campus. You know, some of it needs to move past the colonial history, but some of it is very forward thinking in terms of language revitalization or art, or you know, our law school is doing tremendous things. And so it's a big institution, but to better complement individuals and their experience and that entire kind of history that arrived here, we need to do better things. And so I'm super excited to talk about what AIGP can do under the guidance of Graduate Diversity and Dr. Street. But to be honest with you, it has to be tangible, right, for our youth, and it has to be tangible for what these institutions have missed in the past. And I'll stop there.
Wow, those are really great points. Just before this, we were talking about Avery was mentioning some of his family members went on the relocation. And you mentioned Oakland, and my mom was on relocation in Oakland as well. So, you know, I could have very well been from Oakland. But, you know, I think those are really important points because we forget about some of the historical pieces that make up our student population, and not just being from the reservations and rural locations, but being from these locations where our families were relocated. So highly important. And I want to really thank Dr. Streeter for really bringing that to be able to see a vision. And maybe you could talk a little bit more about that before we get to Maya. I see Maya's back on again.
I think the part that I would add is I think you have a lot of young people on the call that they may be questioning themselves as to why would I pursue a PhD, for example, or a graduate degree? Why would I go to something beyond college? And it's to understand the ways in which so-called new knowledge is created in these spaces at an elite research one institution. And I'm of the firm belief that the only way we can really maximize the knowledge that's produced is if everyone's at the table, right? So it makes little sense to have certain identities represented in the lab, in the classroom, as you develop that knowledge, because you'll be missing valuable contributions and perspectives. And particularly when we talk about the indigenous populations, there's so much rich cultural history and knowledges that you sort of carry with you by your mere existence, that I think if your voice isn't heard at these levels, the world is missing out on the contributions you can make to research and advancing the knowledge that as a civilization we are trying to create. So that's why I'm really committed to ensuring that our AIGP program has all the resources that it needs, because our labs, our classrooms desperately need the knowledges that students like you would bring to us to help revolutionize the great research that's already underway here at Berkeley.
Yeah, thank you for especially mentioning how like all these groups sort of work together. And I think I really love this feeling of intersectionality that I'm getting from both Patrick and Dr. Street. And I think that's one thing that's really important, because like we were all put in these spaces together and we have to work together. And I think at the same time, we all amplify each other's voices. So I think that's why it's really important to have you, Dr. Street, who is a non-native person, here just conversating with all of us, because I mean, we're all in this together. And I think it's important just to hear all our voices and all our perspectives when it comes to especially education and graduate school. So thank you. And Maya, we see you're back. So would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? I know we heard you. Yeah, you're good. You're good. We heard you say hello. So yeah, what's some stuff that you're researching, and yeah, what's a little bit about your background?
Yeah, I'm Maya. I am in the English department here at Berkeley, but I work kind of closely with ethnic studies. And of course, ethnic studies has a very rich history here at Berkeley as far as the Native faculty goes. And I've gotten to benefit from that in many ways. I was just hearing Denzel speak to this kind of idea of the importance of representation, not only in our colleges, but also at the PhD and faculty level as kind of thought leaders. And then also just the importance of having, PhD is a kind of gateway to, to faculty. And so the importance of having, Indigenous and Native faculty members at our schools, and the role that we play not only as thought leaders, but also in mentorship and teaching and representation in the classroom on the other side, right? So not only representations on our campuses in our student body, but also in our, professoriate. And so that just struck me. And then my research, I think Avery was asking about that, is focused on representations of Native people in literature by ethnic Americans, so Asian Americans and African Americans, and related to the kind of post-civil rights era. And so my research is very much grounded in the kind of Berkeley history and in the Bay Area, larger Bay Area history. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome to hear that you're research is very unique, and I think I've never really heard anybody do any research like that. And I think it's really important because, especially for our students to hear out there, because I mean, they honestly, I remember going into research before I learned anything about it, before presenting at conferences. I remember I thought it was just like, oh, like I thought research was only really scientific. Like you never really heard research from a different perspective other than pouring some chemicals in another chemical. I think that's one really important thing that we need to really teach our students is that research is I think that is the pathway to the future, especially when it comes to teaching. And if you want to teach at universities or prestigious universities, I think that's your route, is through research. So I think that's it's good to hear that you're researching something that's really unique and cool.
Thank you.
And I guess the one question I have for you, Maya, too, is what was it about UC Berkeley that sort of attracted you to the university over, say, another university?
Yeah, so I had an idea of what I wanted to study. Of course, when you come in as a graduate student, you have, you say you're going to research one thing, and then oftentimes you end up different paths and, find new questions that you want to explore. But I did have an idea that I wanted to kind of work on issues of representation for Native people. And that kind of led me to look at departments, and Berkeley has a very strong institutional history in that sphere. And so I was interested in faculty, but another thing, that really attracted me to Berkeley was also the area. The Bay Area has such a rich, community to support me outside of the university. And I found that oftentimes, Berkeley can feel a little lonely institutionally, but I've often found that like some of my, greatest support networks have been kind of community and having, just other Native people in community in Oakland and in Berkeley. And there's so much, because of the rich history, there's a lot of organizations and just, networks that kind of have been a really deep source of nourishment for me while I've been here at my time.
Perhaps this could start our conversation, and I wanted to add to that. So under AIGP, my role within AIGP, right, is to foster some of these research ideas, because we all know as Native individuals, sometimes when we arrive in these education settings, we are then informing our department, our faculty, or our programs about what these things are. And so one of the components of AIGP is to foster these ideas so students don't feel like they are independent in bringing their department up to speed at a place like Berkeley, right, which knows the education subject very well, but maybe not some of the epistemology or heritage components. And I say that because within that relationship in this space, that could send people home. If you don't understand things that I am trying to highlight before you, or perhaps you don't want to reinforce what I'm sharing through an education setting, right? People will leave. And historically, we as Native people have not been included within those kinds of settings, right? 75 years ago, my grandparents were having different conversations around Indian education than we are today. And so one of the main components of AIGP is to create this hub that fosters the research for our grad students, but more importantly, helps move it over into a career setting so that you're still doing the same kind of work that brought you here to Berkeley with your career and what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for highlighting AIGP too, because I know you're really excited, you're really passionate about all the work you're doing, and I'm excited to see what AIGP brings for all our students in the future. I know it's a great resource just to get in your head now, everyone out there, because if you have that in your head now, you always remember it throughout your college career. And I know we've sort of talked about this a little bit in the sort of mentioning it here and there so far, but what is it like to be Native in Berkeley? And what's the Native presence like on campus compared to maybe previous campuses, or just, I guess, difference from your communities? And that could be for, I don't know, Maya or Patrick, whoever wants to go first.
So I guess I'll go first with the administrative answer. We have a tremendous community. You know, like I said before, Berkeley's big. There's a lot of different Native programming and resources that are on campus. But one of the primary efforts is the NASD program, the Native American Student Development. This is run by Phenosha Barley and her counterpart, Louisa Hartstead. But they have done a tremendous job within the past 4 to 5 years of really reinforcing a central community for Berkeley. You know, they host a lot of heritage-themed events, very much through undergraduate lens. They work to reinforce their experience as well. But, you know, they are very central to Berkeley, the Berkeley Native community. And, you know, I hope within AIGP that I can complement more of a graduate component within that, that centralization. And so I did want to point to them directly. We also have various student organizations that are on campus that are doing wonderful things. I mentioned the law school, right? I think I'll start with them because recently, and this kind of spills over into AIGP, prior to the pandemic, UC Berkeley, NALSA, the Native American Law Student Association, hosted the National Moot Court Championship. You can look this up online, but it was the official Moot Court Championship, which was held at Berkeley. And a part of this effort, I was able to bring or invite Professor Walter Echohawk, who served as a judge for the Moot Court competition, right? But a lot of my efforts to bring him to campus was to highlight his student experience, right? The same kind of content that we navigate, you know, our senior year, if you will, how he maintained his identity, his research aspirations, all the way up into, you know, law school, and then being a notable, you know, native person, right, within education and politics and in community. What informed that, right? What were some of the personal things that you had to experience that allowed you to move past some of these barriers that exist within these spaces? And that was very intentional, right? Because I wanted to bring some of the Professor Echohawk's experience and personality that kind of just, you know, takes away from the formality of LSATs or financial aid for law school, or even wrapping your head around the application process for a place like Berkeley. And that went over fairly well. But these are the kinds of efforts that I'm considering within AIGP that speak to that accountability that I mentioned, right? It has to be applicable to our home communities. We have to be saying the same things that we're saying here that we do to the places that we come from. And it has to hold substance, or it will just be another caricature of Indian education that hasn't worked in the past.
Right. That's important, Patrick. I mean, I think this is a rich conversation about all the different programming and, you know, programs that are available to our students at Berkeley. Dr. Street, what is the diversity like overall for campus?
That's a good question. I know more for the graduate students than I know for the campus. But you should know we have 30,000 students on campus, which is a lot of students, both undergraduate, professional, and graduate students. At the graduate level, we're just around 15% classified as underrepresented minority by the federal sort of educational standards. But as Patrick would have discussed earlier, there are a lot of intersectionalities involved in the individual student experience, right? So I highly doubt that we're capturing the true diversity of our student body in those numbers, because these are just people self-identifying. And part of the job of the Office of Graduate Diversity is to look beyond the box you clicked in the application and to really get into what are the experiences you bring to Berkeley, and more importantly, what are the ways in which we can enrich your student experience. So I like to think of our office as a safety net for students, so that beyond the academic discipline that they're pursuing, we are the place where they find community, they find a friendly face, they find someone who shares their identity. And one of the things Maya could probably talk to you about is she's one of our diversity and community fellows. We have now 18 of them, and they come from such varied backgrounds. And one of the important roles they fill is just being someone to talk to. So you would see them on webinars talking about what is a PhD and how do you get to a PhD program. But they also have office hours, and they just, now we're in Zoom, they just talk to students one-on-one on Zoom about life. Just being someone to talk to. So I can potentially see a native student reaching out to Maya to talk about, hey, I'm a first-year student trying to navigate this thing. What are some tips you have for me in terms of excelling in class, or getting over the annoying aspect of research in having to explain what my native research is about each time I'm presenting it, right? So our hope in that fellows program is that those students are paving the way for much more enriching experiences for newer students, so that Maya, in her, I think she's in the 4th year, she is looked at as a mentor. And where she may have experienced some traumatic experiences in her 1st year, the hope is that she would have learned from that and she could pass on the knowledge so that that new student doesn't have to go through that process. So that's what we're working on in our office, to really pave the way where students see themselves reflected, not just in the classroom, but in the campus community, and making life a little bit easier for those students. We have a long way to go in 2021 in higher education, and making particularly graduate school reflect the makeup of our country. And so the work, my life's work, and the work of the office and folks like Patrick, is to really, really think of a new vision for what graduate education can be. For so long, our students have been told, oh, you got to go to college, and college is seen as the be all and end all. And as important as college is, knowledge creation really happens at the graduate level, right? So how can we expose and open up that level to even more students who can bring their expertise and share it with the rest of us and the rest of our faculty colleagues who may be limited in their own experiences and backgrounds, and would willingly transform their research by incorporating more indigenous approaches and knowledges. So that's how we view diversity and the importance of our office to that work.
It is really important, and I'm glad that there's a peer mentor type of process for students coming in. So thank you. Avery.
Cool. And Dr. Street, I know you mentioned sort of just like that, students bringing their story to the campus and then also them learning from challenges. But I guess that kind of brings me on to Maya, and I was wondering, Maya, what, I know I've experienced challenges, but I want to know what was the biggest challenge you experienced in either your undergraduate or graduate so far, and how did you overcome that challenge?
Yeah, so I can start with my undergraduate, which was I hadn't left home for, I think for my entire life before that, and so I flew across. I went to undergraduate I went to my undergraduate institution in California as well. And so just flying across the country was I remember a huge barrier to me. And I wasn't able to financially, afford campus visits. And so something that my undergraduate institution did was fly me out. And I know that just, secured the deal for me in many ways of feeling kind of comfortable. And so that's kind of like a pre-undergraduate, situation. But even when I entered college and was a first year student, I still had that kind of discomfort of being so far away from home and so far away from my community as well. And so then in graduate school, I think a big difficulty or challenge that I faced was just kind of adapting to the course load and adapting to feeling like there are, so many people that were, so far ahead of me, or, feeling like having a lot of imposter syndrome, I suppose would be the word for it. Feeling like it was, maybe it was a mistake that I was accepted to the program. And I think that, so just to give one example, my first year, for graduate school, you are usually taking at Berkeley and in my department, like 3 seminars at a time. And I remember that I was so overwhelmed by my finals load that I ended up dropping one class because I wasn't aware of the options for me as a graduate student to kind of support that. And fortunately, that was able to be rectified later on. But, just beginning, it was kind of lonely to, navigate feeling like I couldn't talk to anyone because I carried a lot of shame around, and a lot of doubt around my, capability in my department. And so I was kind of hiding and not reaching out to people because I didn't have mentors to talk to or didn't feel comfortable talking to anyone. So later on, I was able to kind of develop relationships with faculty, and those faculty through those relationships, encouraged me to kind of rectify that, one dropped course. And that completely, was not only administratively supportive in that I was able to get full credit for a class that I had taken, but also, just showed me, moving forward that I had that support available to me, and that, just kind of, feeling like if I had questions, which I know at least I did, I had many questions coming in, and a lot of people who come to my office hours similarly feel like they have all these questions and no one to answer them, that they were, answerable by faculty. And now we have this, Denzel and Patrick are leading this incredible program, so that I have people have other graduate students to talk to, so that students who come to me in my office hours have me to talk to, and so that they don't have to, if they don't feel comfortable taking that to faculty, because oftentimes it's a professional relationship, right? That they have, support within the institution. And I think that's fantastic.
I'm glad you brought up the imposter syndrome, and this was a big effort within the fellowship program. But the idea, right, is to create a collective kind of space, if you will, through the intersectional lens. And I say intersectional because it's something that's very specific to Native identity, right, and how we self-identify, or even how we navigate things like blood quantums, on-res, off-res, so forth, right? Legacy. And so the idea is to reinforce diverse or intersectional people, grad students, to feel included as researchers, right? So we have passionate individuals who are focused on, Black Lives Matter issues. They feel just as confident in this setting, sharing their research ideas, their experience, everything, their need for resource with an Indigenous student, for example, or a DACA student, or somebody else who is very passionate about their experience in research, and also feeling like they might be alone at Berkeley, right? And one of the strengths to this is Dr. Street's efforts to reinforce that through the graduate division, right? And I say that because we as Native people, sometimes if we even found ourselves at places like Haskell, we need to craft a belief system with people, right, that allows us to see ourselves in the next necessary step, so that we may find ourselves in charge of the AIGP program, or doing something different, or at least making those opportunities. And so I'm glad that you mentioned the imposter syndrome. Back to my previous conversation, I just want to run that we also have NALSA, the law students, but we also have INC, the Indigenous Native Coalition. They are very active and strong. We have the American Indian Graduate Student Association, and we have ACES, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. All of these organizations are here at Berkeley, but just like I had mentioned before, they are currently navigating, their experience in a weird setting. And this kind of is what we want to do better here at Berkeley during this time. And so I'm really thankful to talk about all of that, but it definitely needs some visibility and reinforcement. And so I think that's the big thing for our conversation. And Maya represents that inaugural crew coming in to make sense of that.
That's good. Thank you, Patrick, because I know, not all our universities are as far along. And again, you have a rich history there. So it's a little, it's more happening. And so that's enlightening to hear that that's happening and going to maybe roll forward, especially with in today's society. But, I think one of our last questions that Avery and I have is, what advice would you give to future Indigenous students? And I'll start with Maya.
Wow. So I guess a big summary is that your voice is valuable, and that you're also, I want to say valuable as a student, right? Like what you have to offer the institution, whether it's a college or whether it's graduate school or undergrad, your voice is valuable on campus. It's valuable to other students on campus, and it's also valuable in an institutional sense, right? And for your department, right? Whatever you end up majoring in. And another, on that line, being to, not feel held back, or, by, any doubts that you have about, your ability or, your belonging. And just partially from my own experience, don't fear, seeking out, others to kind of support you through that, and also support, when wherever you end up bringing other people along and supporting others in that capacity.
That's very thoughtful. I mean, just impromptu. Your voices are valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
How about you, Patrick?
So my words are, anything is possible, and please decolonize these spaces, right? I say that because the American Indian experience is largely American, and we're not regressing. And we know very clearly the history that has informed these spaces. Maybe for our viewers out there, just to cover some bases, Berkeley's a land-grant institution. It was built on Ohlone territory, and anthropology and ethnography, and we have a large collection of human native remains and funerary objects at the Hearst Museum, right? That is what made Berkeley, Berkeley. But the new direction, and I know Dr. Street and Maya have represented that thus far, but recently, what does this look like? We just went through an effort to unname some of our facilities here on campus, in particular, LeConte and Barrows Hall, and also the law school. So, again, this history, right, and our efforts on this call today, they inform the space, and the space does listen, and the space is making an effort. And so, given this history, there's large efforts to unname and do things better at Berkeley, right? And so my words to young Native students are, anything is possible. Come on over here. We can hang out, we can meet people just like you, just like me, and we can further inform these spaces so that we raise the profile of the academy, but also better meet the needs of people just like you and I and the support networks that we come from, because that traditionally hasn't happened. And so those are my words. And then thank you for letting me run the plug.
No, you're good. You're good. And how about for you, Dr. Street? Oh, no, you're good, Maya. You're good.
Oh, I just wanted to add to that and kind of the spirit of Patrick's, comment, and kind of going back to my own, which is that, when I said your voice is valuable, like the Native voice has been so valuable in making Berkeley's reputation as an institution, right? Like so many Native scholars taught at Berkeley or gone to Berkeley, and just have I think contributed in a lot of ways to Berkeley's reputation as this high elite institution. And I really want to just honor that and voice that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, we talked about just how long the history is. Like my grandma was relocated out there. Dina's mom was out there. Like a lot of our history from I guess the Reno, Northern Nevada area is rooted in the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, Berkeley, because a lot of us were sent out there. So I think it's important to highlight that and realize that we do have that connection right now. But Dr. Street, I was wondering if you had any advice for Indigenous college students who you think, or what would be the best advice for just any Indigenous college students who you think might want to come to Berkeley?
I would say through different mechanisms, your voice has been silenced enough, and it's time that you make your voice heard. And one of the ways you can do that is through quality, rigorous research. And so we welcome you to join Maya and others like her in this space to make your voice heard and to have your communities take their rightful place in this place or space we call America. So take advantage of those opportunities, and if there's any way we can help you, whether it's through providing research opportunities, connecting with students like Maya, feel free to reach out to us. Our email is very easy to remember. It's ogd@berkeley.edu. So just reach out to us, and Patrick and myself will do whatever it takes to provide you with information and or connections that you think may be helpful to take you to this level.
And to that point, I do have office hours every week. And so if any of you, want to attend one of my office hours, if you have questions or just kind of want to talk one-on-one, please do. I'm super excited and happy to talk to everyone.
That's great.
And you can find those hours on the fellows page.
So if you go to our website, it's grad.berkeley.edu/diversity. You just go to current students. Under there, you would see the fellows. Maybe I'll send the link to Avery in the chat, and that way he can share it with you all.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. I'll definitely share that out. And yeah, we'll make sure everyone gets all this stuff. So yeah, thank you for giving that a shout out. But now we have some questions from our online viewers. And one question we have from Dwayne is, how can TCU, so tribal colleges and universities, create better network opportunities to help our students move on to institutions like Berkeley after graduating from, or maybe even transferring from TCU?
So I think I had mentioned some of this before, but I call it accountability, right? But it's meeting our Native students where they are. A lot of us are interpreting things that we find very difficult, that they get in the way of these, our education. And let's be honest, the incentive of education is somewhat mysterious for us in our culture, right? Because we still are making sense of these things. And so with that being said, how does our identity, right, kind of inform, elements of the academy, but also incorporate where we have been and what's been missing from these conversations, and what does that look like going forward? I mean, Native identity has just been not incorporated in detail within some of these topics. And individuals like myself, we look at it as, well, I'd rather stay at home and embrace things that complement my identity than these things that I don't understand, such as education, because they're foreign to our communities, our systems, and our culture. I hope that makes sense, but the idea is to create better accountability for future generations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's that's important, because I think this is where also the imposter syndrome sort of plays into, because you come from TCUs that are like, some of them only have less than 1,000 students, moving on to even any university that has more than 20,000+ students. It can be what's the word? It can be intimidating for students. So I think it's important just to sort of build those relationships now, just so students know that they can move on to bigger institutions like Berkeley and high-ranking institutions, research institutions too. And one other question we have, this one's from Sandra. She said, can you provide advice on protocols or the process Indigenous students should consider when planning to engage in graduate research with their own tribe or their own communities? And Maya, I'm not sure if you want to take this one, if you have a little bit of experience, or Patrick, it doesn't matter.
Sorry, I'm just reading the question really quick.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah.
The idea, right? I think I said this before, an opportunity to reconcile with our home communities, because the American Indian experience is not regressing, right? And so how do we incorporate criteria for, say, our tribal officials, or what does a Native lawyer do for their home community, or how does a Native environmentalist go to school and still maintain our cultural epistemologies, but then come back and integrate sustainable energy effort, right? What does that look like? And these are all parts of these conversations that need to happen at spaces like Berkeley and remove these barriers, but also meet the needs of where students are. Some of us don't have internet on the res. Some of us are parents before we are students. Some of us are veterans, right? And so what does this look like, complementary to new things at new spaces? And how does that inform? Like I said, I was a senior in high school, did not have a clear idea. How does that make sense collectively?
Yeah.
To answer that, Sandra, the idea is to foster, IRB, right? The education protocols that are mysterious, that Native students are going to these places to figure out and then take back to their home community. The idea is to provide that reconciliation as well, so that tribal communities don't feel like they are reinventing this history or this systemic approach of being studied, right? But that they are also complementing members of their community and supporting them to go off into these strange places, and then hearing what they have to say back and joining that. That's what I mean.
Maya?
Yeah, and thank you for your question. I was gonna just, kind of speak to some of what Patrick already touched on, which was, so a few things that are coming up for me. One thing was that it was funny because I recently ran into it, but it's a very old article that Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz published in the 80s. And she was talking about how do we make what does a Native professional look like, or academy look like? And this was in the 80s that she's talking about this. So it's very funny that, because it has so many resonances, the problems that she identifies with today. And, so one of the things that she picks up on is, having a, Native professoriate. And so having people in, the teaching role, but also the other thing that she picks up on is having tribal leadership, right? Like having leadership, people who come to these places and then are able to return to them and kind of bridge the gap. And then just another thing that I wanted to pick up on was that my research doesn't necessarily, well, in some circumstances it does, but I will say that most of the time I don't do field research because I'm, the humanities oftentimes doesn't. But the way that a thing that has been really important to me is that for many good reasons, as some of Berkeley's history, with Ishi and with the Hearst Museum goes to show, is that Patrick picked up on this, is that we become the object of research, right? Like there's like the institutional gaze is upon us and our culture, and kind of not only decolonizing the university, but also trying to reconcile or heal some of the distrust that keeps my own community and a lot of the Native community from suspicion of the university, and trying to bridge that gap. And so something that I've done in my own time as a graduate student is offering community-based donation classes. And so this isn't necessarily affiliated with the university, but this has been something, to share the kind of ideas that I was, have the privilege of learning as a graduate student, with the community at no cost, right? And so just kind of finding ways, not only within the institution, within our research, but also, finding ways in the community to, build bridges.
Mm-hmm.
I know we're running out of time, and I did kind of want to just circle back to Dr. Warjak, right? And her presence in the Berkeley community and her efforts that she represents. We have tremendous alumni here that are going out in the world and doing tremendous things, but their experience has been largely individual. And I even say that for, I think, confidently, other diverse people that have attended grad school at Berkeley, that their experience was largely individual. And so, we want to complement that legacy that Dr. Warjak has created, that she started and she represents, but to make that more of a visual thing here, an application, right? And I know we've covered a lot of ground today, but what does that look like past these histories moving forward? And so we are very much interested in developing new Dr. Warjaks here at Berkeley with new thoughts.
Cool. Yep. And so for everyone out there, next week we're going to be having Dr. Lenata Warjak come on. She's going to talk more about Berkeley, going to Berkeley back in I think it was the 60s or 80s. I can't really remember. Yeah, but we'll have her next week. And first off, I just want to say thank you, Patrick, Dr. Street, Maya. Thank you for coming out tonight. Your voices, everything you said was really powerful, and I know for sure that it really touched all our viewers who are watching tonight. And I just want to say thank you again for taking the time out of your day, for sharing this knowledge with us, sharing your presence, and we're thankful for you all. And I hope everybody has a great night. And maybe you want to say a quick goodbye, real quick, and we should be good to go.
I would just want to add that if there are ways in which you think we can help you, feel free to reach out to Patrick or myself, whether it's a partnership with your institution, a one-on-one, whatever ways you think we can help, reach out and we'll find a way to make it work.
All right, thank you.
Please contact me, aigp@berkeley.edu or via email, pnaranjo@berkeley.edu. You can ask me anything you like. That's why I'm here.
Cool.
The same goes for me, as far as my office hours go, with the Fellows Program. And thank you for having me, everyone. Thank you for having me, Avery. And, it's a pleasure to meet you all, and I hope to connect with everyone and connect with everyone who's here. Please reach out. I would love to speak to you and answer any questions.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Great show, Dina. I'll see you next week with Dr. Lenata Warjak. I'm excited. And everyone don't forget to share our social media at Amplified Natives on Instagram. And we also have our Facebook page, Amplified Nevada Native Youth. And then follow our YouTube page, same name. That's where we post all our live videos. You can check out all our past videos there too. So have a great night, everyone. Have a great weekend. Be safe. And yeah, we'll see you next Thursday.
Just don't forget, your voice is valuable. Anything is possible. And your voices have been silenced far too long. So students who are listening, get out there, get the good grades in high school, and get to your undergrad and your graduate school programs. See you next week.